Welcome on in, everyone. New World's alpha testing has finally started up again, and the first wave of invites have been sent on the 20th of October, with more invites being sent as time goes on. Now, access to this alpha, of course, is going to be confidential, so we're not going to be able to share anything that we get to see if we get in the alpha or if you guys get in it. But we do get to see some changes that they have made to the game because they've provided us with some patch notes. And I, for one, am very excited to hopefully get in the alpha and test out some of these changes myself. But in short, I think the patch notes did a good job addressing a lot of the different concerns that players had in combat, especially PvP combat in the game. So let's jump right into it and see what's changed. So we're going to start with the combat changes, and they have added a new weapon. We get to use spears in New World. That was one of my initial criticisms about the game, was that I really liked how the different weapons felt to use individually, but I also felt like there wasn't enough variety in the weapon choices, especially since your character build is heavily reliant on the weapon setups that you use. So the addition of spears right away in the first alpha test is pretty exciting. I didn't expect this. I wouldn't think we'd see a new weapon added until at least the first new patch or so that the game had, but there we go. We get to see spears right away. So they're going to scale primarily on dexterity, but they're also going to benefit from strength, kind of similar to the hatchet, whereas I think the hatchet was benefiting more on strength and secondarily dexterity. There's two skill trees for the spears, the zoner skill tree, which is going to specialize at keeping enemies at a distance and throwing spears from range, and then the impaler skill tree, which is going to be gap closers and quicker attacks that impart status effects. And of course, they added a new quest line for legendary spears, every weapon in the game having a quest line that you can do to get a legendary weapon. So I think we could expect to see that. Now moving on to our next big combat change, there are per weapon cooldowns. In the New World preview, every single slot had a shared cooldown. Regardless of what weapon you were using, the cooldown was based on the slot that skill was in. Thanks to the per weapon cooldowns, we're now going to be able to cast all of our skills independently for our weapons. They won't share the cooldown based on the slot. So that's going to allow us to just use a lot more skills in combat than we were before. A lot of people voiced their concerns about New World feeling like you didn't have a lot of different options when your skills were on cooldown outside of just spamming your one attack. Well, this is hopefully going to add a little bit more flavor to combat for those people. And of course, it's going to make combat feel a lot more fast-paced, I think, because people are going to be whipping out a lot more powerful and unique attacks than they were before. And another huge change is that they've also sped up the weapon switching speed. This is a big deal because it allows you to switch between weapons and just combo your attacks a lot smoother than before. During the New World preview, there was about a half-second cooldown animation or so when you'd switch weapons, and you could kind of cancel it with a dodge roll. So I'm hoping that with this change, the weapon switch will be very seamless or be able to cancel with a variety of different abilities. They also made it so you can now roll without stamina after being stuck in multiple consecutive reactions. So this was something that a lot of people had trouble with too, was getting stuck in a stun lock where an opponent, namely a player, was hitting you over and over and you had no stamina to get out. This is going to give them an option if they've run their stamina dry and that ends up occurring. Now, you're still going to get punished, I think, if you get caught with your stamina down because it says multiple consecutive hits. I'm not sure how many that's going to mean, but I will assume it's more than 3. And finally, abilities that are interrupted or canceled before the active frame of the attack will no longer be on cooldown. So that's basically if something has a cast time and you stop casting it before the ability is finished or does its damage, you won't get the cooldown, which is nice. Now, they also did some balance changes to the individual weapons. Hatchet got quite a few changes. The Berserk ability was reduced to 10 seconds. This ability was quite strong, making you pretty much unkillable for a while, so good change there, I think. Berserking Endurance was reduced to 2 seconds. Call the Weak changed to heavy attacks only now. Rejuvenating Kills was reduced to 5%, and Relentless Fury was reduced to 5%. And then finally, they reduced the homing on the second and third light attacks. I'm not really sure what they mean by that, but I'm going to assume it makes the attack a little bit less accurate or difficult to land. So just some balance changes to Hatchet to essentially nerf the damage on it all around, and also nerf Berserk being its strongest ability, I think. Now, the Life Staff got some big changes too. They decreased the speed of the light distance by 50%, and they increased the cooldown to 25 seconds. So you're not going to be able to teleport as often, and the decreased speed, I'm going to assume you can teleport as far now, but it's just not going to be as quick. There is a teleport on the Fire Staff as well, which I think is going to retain the same speed that it had before. So it'll be cool to see the difference in these two teleports now, not just the Life Staff kind of being way better than the others. Is this going to make the necessity of having a Life Staff for PvP change? I'm not sure. As it sits right now, I still think having this teleport is going to be a huge deal because of the distance you're traveling, not necessarily the speed that you're going at. 50% reduction, it will be slower, but it's still a quick teleport. So we'll have to see. And then, of course, they fixed the healing abilities, not providing mastery experience. Very nice, easier to level up that Life Staff now. Now, they made some changes to the backstab adjustments as well. Any melee attack that hits an enemy's back now gets a backstab damage bonus, so it's not just heavy attacks like I believe it was before. And on top of it, all melee weapons currently have a 1.3 backstab damage bonus. This will now be tuned per weapon in the future, and backstabs can no longer cause knockdowns. I think this is a good change because a lot of people would get stuck in a chain stun just from the heavy backstabs over and over, namely from Sword and Board in PvP. So we'll see if that stops people from getting knocked down into that chain stun. Nonetheless, I do like these balance changes. There wasn't too terribly much done here, but they did address some of the problems that people were having. Again, kind of listening to what people had said about their experience in New World. Now, they've also added a new threat system to make enemy targets more understandable and controllable. So this threat system is essentially a system that detects how dangerous a target is, and it makes it so that mobs are more likely to target a more dangerous opponent. There's going to be things that you can do in your build, and there are going to be certain actions in combat that will increase or decrease the amount of aggro, I guess, you'll take from monsters. So I do like the addition of this system instead of the generic threat system we had before. Namely, I think the addition of this is to add a tank role to the game, and of course to maybe save the newer players who would have a high-level player just round up a bunch of mobs and then run them over to a new player and swamp them with something that they can't handle. So there are some changes to how you progress your character in New World as well. They reduce the speed of leveling in general while increasing the relative value of questing XP. So in specific, they reduce the XP you get from corrupted breaches, and they reduce the XP you get from killing creatures, while also reducing the mastery XP required to level your weapons in order to compensate for the lower XP rates that you get from killing things. They also reduce the delivery mission XP and rewards as well. These changes, I think, will make the game a little bit longer while you play it, because you're obviously not going to level up as fast, but it also puts a lot of emphasis on completing the quests that you can do in the game. Namely, I'm thinking about those PvP quests, which offer you a lot more XP and rewards than your other questing options. So if they're going to increase the relative value of questing XP by nerfing all other sources of XP, I think that this will just incentivize people to want to do quests, especially those PvP quests, in order to level up quickly and get themselves some good rewards. There are some big changes to the attribute system as well. They increased the amount of attribute points that you have by a lot, and of course they added diminishing returns to increase build variety. I really like this because it was pretty much just stack your attribute of choice, and that was the best way for you to go for your build. Now, they also increased the amount of attribute points that you get from leveling, and they added attribute points to gear itself. They also changed the focus attribute to be the primary scaler for Life Staff, and it no longer affects your general cooldown rate. Their long-term goal being the focus staff to be the attribute for healers and support characters, while intelligence is your damage-dealing magical stat. Gems no longer give attribute points, but will instead provide elemental damage for weapons and family banes for armor. Now, there's been some changes to how gear works as well. The level requirements and rarity mapping for gear has been changed in order to promote a strong endgame gear chase. So gear will now have a specific level requirement instead of being based on a tier of level 0, 10, 20, 30, and so on. And this level requirement will be based on the gear score itself. And finally, if you have two pieces of gear with the same gear score, one being purple and one being blue, the purple rarer piece of gear you'll be able to equip at a lower level. So that is essentially what makes these lower level rare items more valuable. You can equip them at a lower level, essentially giving you more power. And there's a big one for me here. Rarity mappings were changed so that legendary gear can now be crafted and dropped from the world. Previously, we couldn't get legendary gear as drops from the world. I didn't know that because I didn't make it to endgame. And I didn't make it to endgame crafting either, but it is nice to know that we'll be able to create some really high quality gear later on in the game ourselves. And then finally, they added 16 new perks to the game, 9 perks that will reduce weight of a specific class of items, and then finally 7 perks that will affect your threat generation. So that's kind of your aggro system. So that's it. That's the end of the patch notes. I would love to hear what you guys think about these changes. Personally, I'm pretty excited. I like a lot of them, especially the addition of a new weapon. The changes to combat, I think, will make combat feel better than it did during the last test phase that we had. So I'm excited to get into the alpha if I can and test it out. If you guys enjoyed that video, hit that like button. If you're new here, I create regular Elder Scrolls Online content, but I of course will be covering New World during the test phases and when the game comes out. We feature the top 5 PvP battles for the Elder Scrolls Online here, so if you guys want to send in your own clips or if you want to send in a build to be featured on the channel, you can send that to KristoferESO@hotmail.com. Give me a follow on Twitter if you guys want to keep up to date with my shenanigans. You can check out my Twitch to catch the live streams, or if you guys just want to come and chat. You can also check out my website, KristoferESO.com. It's got written guides for all of my ESO builds, and it is a hub for all of my ESO content. We are sponsored by What the Fast. They're a VPN for gamers. They can give you better ping to your favorite games, and they're free to try for the first month. Link down in the description below. And then last but certainly not least, a huge thank you and a huge shout out to all of my patrons on Patreon. Without you guys, I wouldn't be able to do this job, so thank you guys for helping me out. Thank you everybody for tuning in and watching. And as always, I hope you guys enjoyed. Have a great night, everyone, and I'll see you next time.